No one in that small courtroom expected history to walk through the door in handcuffs. But when 53-year-old Elijah Rowe, a quiet black man with tired eyes and calloused hands, was dragged in wearing county blues, the whispers began. The judge didn't know. The prosecution didn't know. Even the cops who arrested him had no idea. They thought he was just another washed-up veteran. But then the doors opened again, and in walked a decorated four-star general, eyes burning. With regret, medals catching the light. What he said next turned the trial into a national reckoning and revealed a buried chapter of American military history that someone very powerful had tried to erase. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The afternoon sun beat down on Elijah Rowe's broad shoulders as he leaned deeper into the engine compartment of an old Chevy pickup. His hands, calloused and steady, worked methodically through the truck's aged components. The vehicle belonged to Martha Wilson, a widow, whose husband had passed 3 years prior. Her fixed income couldn't cover a proper mechanic, but Eli never asked for payment. "Mr. Rowe, I brought you some lemonade," Martha called, approaching with a glass that sweated in the summer heat. Eli straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Thank you, ma'am." His voice was low, barely above a whisper. He accepted the drink. With a nod, his dark eyes never quite meeting hers, Martha smiled. "You know, you're a blessing. Don't know what this town would do without you fixing things for folks who can't afford the garage prices." Eli's lips twitched into something almost resembling a smile. "Just keeping busy." He drained the glass and returned to work, signaling the end of conversation. As Martha walked away, a group of kids on bikes circled nearby, watching with curious eyes. "Hey, Ghost!" one boy called out, grinning. "You gonna make that truck fly?" Eli didn't look up, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. At the nickname, the local children had started calling him Ghost years ago, partly because of how quietly he moved, partly because of how he seemed to appear and disappear around town without warning. The name had stuck, though only the kids used it too, his face. By late afternoon, the truck was running again. Eli closed the hood with a solid thunk and started walking toward Miller's Diner on Main Street. His routine rarely varied. Fix things during the day, eat at Miller's in the evening, return to his small house on the outskirts of town by nightfall. The diner's bell jingled as he entered. Conversation dimmed momentarily as heads turned, then resumed. Eli slid into his usual booth by the window, ordered his usual black coffee and meatloaf special, and sat in silence. 20 minutes into his meal, the diner's door swung open violently. A red-faced white man in his 40s stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. Behind him, hovering uncertainly in the doorway, stood an older man in weathered fatigues with a patchy beard. "Get lost, you bum!" the drunk man shouted, turning to the doorway. "Nobody wants your kind begging around here." The man in fatigues flinched. His hands trembled as he clutched a faded veteran's cap. "I just wanted a cup of coffee," the veteran mumbled. "I got money." "Yeah, right," the drunk sneered, pushing the veteran back. "Go sleep it off under a bridge." The diner fell silent. Eli watched, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. His eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that his attention had shifted. When the drunk shoved the veteran again, harder this time, Eli stood. He moved with surprising grace for a man his size, appearing suddenly between the two men. Without a word, he held out his sandwich to the veteran. "This isn't your business, buddy," the drunk slurred, puffing up his chest. Eli didn't respond. He simply stood there, sandwich extended, body positioned as a human shield between the drunk and the veteran. "Thanks, brother," the veteran whispered, accepting the food with shaking hands. "I'm talking to you." The drunk jabbed a finger into Eli's chest. Eli looked down at the finger, then back up, his expression unchanged. "You should go home," he said quietly. "Sleep it off." The drunk's face contorted with rage. "Don't tell me what to do, you—" The diner's door opened again, and Officer Trevor Banks stepped in. Young, with a permanent scowl and something to prove, Banks had developed a reputation for being overzealous, particularly with the town's black residents. "What's going on here?" Banks demanded, hand resting on his belt. "This guy's causing trouble," the drunk said immediately, pointing at Eli. "Threatening me." "He's lying," said Susan, the diner's waitress. "That drunk was harassing a homeless vet, and Mr. Rowe was just helping." Banks barely glanced at Susan, his attention fixed on Eli. "ID," he demanded, palm out. Eli stood motionless, eyes steady on Banks. "You don't want to do this," he said softly. Banks stiffened. "Excuse me? Is that a threat?" "No," Eli replied. "Just a fact. ID. Now." Banks's hand shifted to his holster. Several diners had pulled out phones recording. An older man near the counter stood up. "Officer, there's no problem here. Eli was just—" "Sir, step back," Banks barked, never taking his eyes off Eli. "Last time. ID or you're under arrest." Eli slowly reached for his wallet, every movement deliberate, telegraphed. Banks watched him like he was defusing a bomb. "On second thought," Banks said, "I need you to get on the ground, hands where I can see them." A murmur rippled through the diner. Eli hesitated, looking around at the growing crowd. Children pressed their faces against the window from outside. For a moment, indecision flickered across his face, the first real emotion he'd shown. "Now!" Banks shouted, drawing his weapon. Eli dropped to his knees, then lay flat on his stomach. As Banks roughly applied handcuffs, a man at the counter, a veteran with a Vietnam War cap, stared at Eli with dawning recognition. "Wait a minute," the veteran muttered. "I know this man." But Banks was already reciting Miranda rights, marching Eli out to his patrol car. At the station, the booking process was mechanical. Fingerprinting, mugshot, charge sheet, resisting arrest, disturbing the peace. Eli said nothing throughout. His silence seemed to unnerve the deputies. As his prints were processed, a computer screen flashed red. An urgent alert from a Department of Defense database popped up, requesting immediate verification and demanding the subject be held for federal questioning. Sheriff Dean Patterson glanced at the screen and snorted. "Another tech glitch. System's been acting up all week." He clicked dismiss and continued processing Eli into a holding cell. Across town, Detective James J.D. Dupree, one of 2 black detectives in the department, was finishing paperwork when the arrest report crossed his desk. Something about the name caught his attention. "Elijah Rowe," he murmured, typing the name into his database. What came back made his eyebrows rise. A heavily redacted file, most entries blacked out, and a DOD seal restricting access. J.D. leaned back, stroking his goatee. Well, who are you, Mr. Rowe?" He made a few calls to old contacts, speaking, in low tones. With each call, his expression grew more troubled. In Atlanta, late that night, Maya Rowe's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "They arrested the ghost." Maya froze. The wine glass in her hand slipped, shattering on her apartment floor. At 32, Maya was a rising star journalist known for uncompromising exposés. She hadn't spoken to her father in years, not since she'd left home for college, rejecting his silence and the growing distance between them. "Dad," she whispered to her empty apartment, "what have you done?" Back at the county jail, Eli sat perfectly still on his bunk. Other inmates gave him a wide berth, instinctively sensing something dangerous in his stillness. He didn't sleep, didn't eat the food pushed through the slot. When night fell, he simply stared upward, eyes tracking patterns only he could see. The sheriff's office, District Attorney Lila Tran reviewed the initial police report with growing concern. The body cam footage showed a calm man saying, "You don't want to do this." Hardly the aggressive threat Banks had reported. "Something's off here," she muttered, tapping her pen against the desk. Despite pressure from the sheriff to process this as a simple case of resisting arrest, she quietly marked the file for further review. What none of them knew was that Eli's fingerprints had triggered more than just a DOD alert. Across the country, urgent meetings were being called, and a storm was building that would soon break over their small town. General Douglas Whitmore stood at the front of a Pentagon briefing room, deep in discussion about troop reallocations in Eastern Europe. At 67, with 4 stars on his shoulders and silver at his temples, Whitmore commanded respect without raising his voice. 35 years of service had taught him that real power lay in measured words and strategic silence. Mid-sentence, his aide approached with a secure tablet. "Urgent alert, sir. Priority Alpha." The room fell silent as Whitmore's eyes scanned the screen. His weathered face, usually a mask of military composure, visibly paled. "Clear the room," he ordered. "Everyone out except Colonel Freeman." When the doors closed, Freeman spoke first. "Sir?" "They've arrested Elijah Rowe," Whitmore said, still staring at the screen. "Christ," Freeman whispered, dropping into a chair. "Where?" "Some backwater county jail, local charge." "But his prints pinged our system." Freeman shook his head. "How long before Klein finds out?" "Minutes, if he doesn't know already." Whitmore rubbed his temples. "Get me everything on this arrest, and I mean everything." Across the Pentagon, in a secured communications room, an emergency conference call had already begun. Military intelligence officials and DoD legal counsel argued in increasingly heated tones. "We need immediate extraction," insisted a Navy captain, "before this blows up." "And tip our hand," countered a civilian analyst. "We don't even know if it's actually him." "The fingerprints matched at 99.8%, said a third voice. "It's him." "Then God help us all," someone muttered, "because Black Echo is about to become very, very public." An Army colonel slammed his hand on the table. "We should have neutralized this situation years ago. Rowe knows too much." "Neutralized?" asked a younger officer. "You mean killed a decorated Marine?" "I mean contained a potential threat to national security," the colonel replied coldly. Meanwhile, Detective J.D. Dupree had spent hours trying to piece together Eli's background. Every database search led to more redactions, more security clearances he didn't possess. Finally, he called an old Army buddy now working at Veterans Affairs. "Frank, I need a favor," J.D. said when his friend answered. "Name's Elijah Rowe, arrested in my jurisdiction. Can't find anything on him that isn't classified 6 ways to Sunday." A long pause followed. "J.D., you need to walk away from this one." "You know him?" Another pause. "Not personally, but I've heard stories." "What kind of stories?" "The kind that don't get told," Frank replied. "Listen to me carefully. If he's who I think he is, then that arrest is the worst mistake they ever made." "Why?" "Because some ghosts are better left alone." Frank's voice dropped. "Call me when this goes sideways. Not if. When." The line went dead. In Atlanta, Maya Rose stared at a box of old photographs, a tumbler of bourbon in hand. Pictures of her childhood laid out on her coffee table, memories of a father who was present but never fully there. One photo showed teenage Maya at her high school graduation. Eli stood awkwardly in dress blues, face impassive even on such a proud day. Another showed him returning home late one night, military duffel over his shoulder, strange bruises on his neck that he refused to explain. The most haunting image was from her mother's funeral. 14-year-old Maya in black, surrounded by relatives. Eli standing apart in the pouring rain, refusing to come under the tent. For 2 hours, he'd stood there, water streaming down his face, indistinguishable from tears. "Why could you never just talk to me?" Maya whispered to the photos. She knocked back the bourbon and began throwing clothes into an overnight bag. Back at the county prosecutor's office, D.A. Lila Tran sat across from Officer Trevor Banks, reviewing his statement. "So you're saying Mr. Rowe directly threatened you?" she asked. Banks leaned back in his chair, exuding confidence. "Absolutely. Said you don't want to do this in a menacing tone." "That's it? Those exact words?" "It was threatening. You had to be there." "I have been there," Tran replied, tapping the body cam footage on her tablet. "I've watched this 17 times. Banks shrugged. "Camera doesn't capture everything. Angle was off." "And the missing section? After you placed him in handcuffs?" "Told. You." "Device glitched. Happens all the time." Tran's eyes narrowed. "Officer Banks, Do you know how many complaints have been filed against you in the past year? Banks' smile faltered. Is that relevant to this case? It might be, she said. It, just might be. In his private office at the Pentagon, General Whitmore made a call he'd hoped never to make. Aaron? It's Doug Whitmore. Colonel Aaron Klein's voice came through, smooth as silk. General, to what do I owe this pleasure? Cut the crap, Aaron. You've heard about Rowe. A pause. I may have received certain intelligence. Don't touch him, Whitmore said. That's a direct order. Klein chuckled. With all due respect, General, I've been a private contractor for 3 years. Your orders don't apply. This isn't a game. Leave him alone. I'll take care of it, Klein replied, voice suddenly cold. Like I've always taken care of our messes. The line went dead before Whitmore could respond. At the county jail, Eli sat in the common area, ignored by most inmates. Only one approached him, a twitchy man with haunted eyes and a military bearing beneath the grime. Staff Sergeant Thomas Green, the man whispered, hand instinctively forming a salute. 82nd Airborne. Sir, I know who you are. Eli's eyes flicked, up, assessing the man. At ease, Sergeant. They said you were dead, Green continued, voice barely audible. That mission in Whiskey Sierra, Eli interrupted, using old code. Ears everywhere. Green nodded rapidly, understanding. What should I do? Watch the eastern wall, Eli murmured. When the thunder comes, keep your head down. Green's eyes widened, recognizing operational language. He nodded once, then retreated. Maya arrived in town late that night, checking into the only motel. First thing in the morning, she marched into the sheriff's office, press credentials displayed prominently. I'm here to interview Sheriff Patterson regarding the arrest of Elijah Rowe, she announced to the startled deputy at the front desk. The sheriff isn't taking interviews about ongoing cases, the deputy replied. Then I'll write that he refused comment on allegations of civil rights violations, Maya countered, already typing on her phone. Should make a compelling headline. The deputy's radio crackled. Sheriff says no press, came a voice. Maya smiled tightly. Tell Sheriff Patterson that Maya Rowe from the Atlanta Standard will be publishing her story with or without his input. The year. Deputy frowned. Rowe? Any relation to the prisoner? He's my father, Maya said calmly. And if you don't let me see him in the next hour, I'm calling every civil rights attorney in my contacts list. As the deputy scrambled to respond, Maya stepped outside and made a call. Ben? It's Maya. I need that favor. Yes, Pentagon-level clearance. I know it's risky, but it's my father. Detective J.D. Dupree had spent all night reviewing what little he could find on Eli Rowe. At 5 a.m., he walked into D.A. Tran's office looking exhausted. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Tran looked up from her own pile of paperwork. I'm listening. The man we're holding isn't just some veteran. I think he might be the ghost sniper. The what? It's a legend in military circles. A sniper so elite his missions were completely off books. Perfect accuracy, perfect discipline. Some say he had hundreds of kills, but officially, he doesn't exist. Tran leaned back. And you think Elijah Rowe is this ghost? Everything fits. The redacted files, the DOD alerts, my contacts' reactions. J.D. placed his hands on her desk. Lila, if this is the ghost sniper I think it is, then you're sitting on a time bomb, and we all better start running or start digging. You believe he's dangerous? I believe people will do dangerous things to keep him quiet. J.D. glanced at the window. And they're already here. Outside the sheriff's office, a black SUV with government plates had parked across the street. 2 men in suits sat inside, watching the building. That night, as the jail settled into darkness, the security cameras flickered briefly. Had anyone been watching the monitors, they would have seen a millisecond of static before the system resumed normal operation. But the system wasn't normal anymore. Someone was now watching through those cameras, studying every angle of Eli Rowe's cell, analyzing every movement of the jail staff. The pieces were in motion, the board was set, and a storm was brewing that would soon break over the quiet town. washing away the foundations of secrets built on decades of silence. Eli Rowe, the ghost, sat motionless on his bunk, eyes open in the darkness. Waiting. Always waiting. The Alabama heat pressed down like a weighted blanket as Maya Rowe parked outside Pete's roadside bar. A neon beer sign flickered in the window, struggling against the midday sun. This was her third stop on a journey that had taken her across 3 states in 2 days. Inside, the bar was nearly empty. A few scattered patrons nursed drinks in dark corners, while ceiling fans pushed around stale air. Maya spotted her target, immediately. A heavyset man with a Marine Corps tattoo visible beneath his rolled-up sleeve. "Mark Willis?" she asked, sliding onto the bar stool beside him. The man looked up, suspicious. "Who's asking?" "Maya Rowe." She watched his reaction carefully. Elijah Rowe's daughter. Willis's beer bottle froze halfway to his lips. "Eli has a daughter? Disappointed?" "Surprised," Willis corrected. "Your father never mentioned family, not once in 4 years." "That sounds like him," Maya replied bitterly. "I need to know about Operation Black Echo." Willis's face drained of color. He glanced around the bar, then leaned in. "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Maya pulled out her phone, showing him news headlines about Eli's arrest. "My father is in jail. I need to know why a routine arrest has the Pentagon scrambling." Willis drained his beer, signaling for another. "You need to let this go." "Not happening. You don't understand what you're poking at." "Then explain it to me." The bartender delivered another beer. Willis waited until he walked away. "I can't tell you about operations that don't officially exist." "Off the record," Maya pressed. "Marine to Marine's daughter." Willis studied her face, Eli's eyes staring back at him. Finally, he sighed. "Your father saved my life. Sierra Leone, 2009. Operation Black Echo." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "We were sent to eliminate a warlord using biological weapons. But someone high up wanted those weapons, not just the warlord. Things went sideways." "What happened?" "Your father made a choice. Saved 47 civilians, including children. Disobeyed direct orders to do it." Willis's hands trembled slightly. "I've never seen anything like it. One man moving through hell like a ghost. And they punished him for it?" "Worse. They buried it. Buried him. Made him invisible." Willis looked up, eyes haunted. If they're coming for him now, it means someone's afraid of what he knows. Back in her motel room, Maya scribbled frantically in her notebook. 4 Marines had told similar stories, each reluctant at first, each eventually breaking under her persistent questioning. They painted a picture of her father she barely recognized, a man of extraordinary skill and unexpected mercy. Across town, DA Lila Tran sat in her darkened office, reviewing the mysteriously returned body cam footage. The timestamps showed gaps, sections missing that should have captured crucial moments of Eli's arrest. Her phone rang, displaying a government area code. When she answered, the voice on the other end was clipped and authoritative. "Ms. Tran, this is Special Agent Carter, Department of Homeland Security. We understand you're reviewing evidence in the Elijah Rowe case." "And how would you know that?" Tran asked, immediately on guard. "That's not important. What's important is that pursuing this case could compromise national security matters. Are you instructing me to drop a legitimate investigation? I'm advising you that continuing down this path would be unwise for your career and potentially dangerous." "Is that a threat, Agent Carter?" "That's reality, Ms. Tran. Some doors should remain closed." The line went dead. Tran stared at the phone, then at the fragmentary footage. Whatever was happening went far beyond a simple arrest. In a luxurious office overlooking the Potomac, Colonel Aaron Klein briefed a small team of private intelligence contractors. A digital dossier displayed on the wall screen showed Elijah Rowe's military photo alongside psychiatric evaluations. "Gentlemen, our priority is containment," Klein explained smoothly. "Our old friend Eli Rowe has resurfaced at a very inconvenient time." "Sir, these psychological reports," one analyst began, "are exactly what the media needs to see," Klein finished. a decorated veteran suffering from paranoid delusions, PTSD, violent tendencies, a tragedy, but not uncommon. But they're fabricated, the analyst continued hesitantly. Klein's smile tightened. They're necessary. By this time tomorrow, I want these files in the hands of every major news outlet. Rowe's credibility needs to be destroyed before he opens his mouth. Meanwhile, Detective J.D. Dupree cornered Officer Trevor Banks in the precinct parking lot. Banks had been avoiding him for days. "We need to talk," J.D. said, positioning himself between Banks and his cruiser. "I've got nothing to say." Banks tried to step around him. J.D. blocked his path. "Funny, because you had plenty to say in your report. Most of it bullshit." "Watch yourself, Dupree." "No, you watch yourself." J.D. moved closer. "I've seen the footage. What's left of it? Rowe made no threatening moves. So why'd you escalate?" Banks's face flushed. "He was disrespectful." "That's not a crime." "Look, I did my job. Did someone tell you to target him?" J.D. interrupted. "Because your body cam just happened to malfunction at the exact moment you cuffed a man with Pentagon-level clearance? That's one hell of a coincidence." Banks's eyes darted nervously. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Let me be clear," J.D. said, his voice dropping. "If you don't come clean, I will bury you. Every complaint, every racial profiling incident, every excessive force allegation, I'll make sure they all stick. You can't prove anything. Try me." J.D. stepped back. "Think about it, Banks. Whatever they're paying you, it's not worth your career. Or worse." Banks said nothing, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. That evening, Maya found an unmarked envelope slipped under her motel room door. Inside was a flash drive and a note reading only, "Watch alone." The video showed a haggard man in his 50s speaking directly to the camera. "My name is William Foster, former intelligence analyst. I worked with Colonel Aaron Klein and Elijah Rowe during Operation Black Echo. What I'm about to say will likely get me killed, but the truth needs to come out." Foster detailed a mission gone horrifically wrong. Biological weapons tested on villages, civilians used as experimental subjects, evidence destroyed. Rowe refused to participate. He went rogue, saved who he could. Klein never forgave him for exposing the operation's true purpose. The video ended with Foster looking nervously over his shoulder. "If you're watching this, I'm probably already dead. They monitor everything. Klein has connections everywhere. Tell Rowe. Tell him I'm sorry I stayed silent so long." Maya searched online and found that William Foster had died 3 days after recording the video. A single car accident on an empty road. In his jail cell, Eli jolted awake, sweat soaking his prison uniform. The nightmare still played behind his eyes. A teenage boy holding a rifle, villagers screaming. The impossible choice. "Not again," he muttered, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. "Not the children." A guard passing by paused, watching him with unease. Eli's reputation had spread through the jail, the silent prisoner who never slept, never complained, moved like a shadow, and seemed to be waiting for something no one else could see. Across town, Maya published her first article. The headline, "Who is the man they call the ghost?" spread across social media within hours. It detailed a decorated Marine sniper whose record had been virtually erased, mentioning only vague outlines of classified missions while focusing on the bizarre circumstances of his arrest. By evening, a small group of protesters had gathered outside the jail, veterans, mostly, holding signs reading "Free Eli Rowe" and "Hero Not Criminal." Maya finally secured permission to visit her father. 15 years of silence stretched between them as she sat across the visitation room table. Neither spoke for a long moment. "You look good," Eli finally said, his voice rough from disuse. "You look terrible," Maya replied. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair enough. Why did you never call?" 15 years, Dad. Not even a birthday card." Eli's eyes, so much like her own, held steady. "It was safer that way." "For who?" "You. For you." He leaned forward slightly. "Some wars don't end, Maya. Some enemies don't forget. That's not good enough. Anger welled up, years of abandonment, crystallizing. Mom died and you just checked out like you chose war over us. I chose silence, Eli corrected softly. So you could live a life without looking over your shoulder. Maya blinked back unexpected tears. Well, I'm looking now. And I'm not stopping until I know everything. As Maya left the jail, she didn't notice the motel clerk watching her, or how he immediately made a call once she was out of sight. That night, a nondescript sedan pulled into town. The driver, an elderly man in civilian clothes, checked into the same motel as Maya, requesting a room with a view of the street. General Douglas Whitmore, posing as a retired accountant, had decided that official channels were moving too slowly. He placed a sealed envelope addressed to District Attorney Lila Tran in the motel manager's hand, along with $200. Make sure this reaches her personally, tomorrow morning. Across town in the county jail, a new face appeared claiming to be Eli's court-appointed defender. The guards waved him through without checking credentials, a fatal mistake. In the interview room, the fake attorney placed his briefcase on the table. Mr. Rowe, I'm here to discuss your case. Eli's expression didn't change. No, you're not. The man smiled thinly. Perhaps we could speak privately. He gestured toward the camera in the corner. They can't hear us, Eli said. But they can see us. Unfortunate. The man's hand moved toward his briefcase. What happened next was so fast the camera barely captured it. Eli's hand shot across the table, immobilizing the man's wrist. In the same fluid motion, he rose and used his free hand to slam the man's head against the table. The briefcase clattered to the floor, revealing a syringe that rolled out. Guards rushed in to find Eli calmly seated while the fake attorney lay unconscious. He's not a lawyer, Eli told the stunned sheriff. Check his credentials, and that syringe. Later, as they led the still-dazed would-be assassin away, Eli delivered a message. Tell your people next time, send someone I didn't train. Maya's investigation exploded onto national news. Cable networks ran constant updates on the Handcuffed hero story, showing drone footage of the small-town jail surrounded by growing crowds of protesters and media trucks. Officer Trevor Banks was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His avoidance of cameras only fueled speculation about his role in the increasingly suspicious arrest. In her office, District Attorney Lila Tran drafted an emergency motion. Her legal assistant Rachel looked over her shoulder with concern. Emergency pretrial hearing? With a full media blackout? Rachel asked. The press will go ballistic. They'll survive, Tran replied, continuing to type. This case has security implications I can't ignore. The envelope from that military guy? Tran nodded, glancing at the classified documents General Whitmore had provided. They confirmed Eli's security clearance and hinted at the volatile truth about operations in Sierra Leone and Afghanistan, just enough to convince her this case went far beyond her jurisdiction. We need enhanced security for the hearing too, Tran added. After that assassination attempt, I'm not taking chances. In a secured hotel conference room, General Whitmore met with Tran that afternoon. Hotel security, reinforced by Whitmore's personal detail, guarded every entrance. Thank you for meeting me, Whitmore said, offering Tran a seat. I appreciate your discretion. Your documents were persuasive, Tran replied. But I need more. What really happened in Sierra Leone? Whitmore's face tightened. A mission that crossed every line we're supposed to defend. He spread photographs. Across the table, villages destroyed, children with inexplicable medical symptoms, mass graves. Officially, this was a counter-terrorism operation. Unofficially, it was a field test for experimental biological weapons. And Rowe? He was supposed to eliminate the warlord and his lieutenants, then extract. Standard black ops. But when he discovered civilians being used as test subjects, he went off mission. Whitmore's voice held grudging admiration. Single-handedly evacuated 47 people while under heavy fire, then disappeared for 3 months. When he resurfaced, He had evidence that implicated several high-ranking officials and private contractors, including Colonel Klein. Whitmore nodded grimly. Klein was running the weapons program. Rowe's evidence could have ended his career, possibly sent him to prison. Instead, there was a cover-up. Rowe was given a choice: silence and an honorable discharge or charges of treason. So he chose silence. For his family's sake, yes. Whitmore leaned forward. Ms. Tran, we need to protect him until the full truth can be exposed. People are still willing to kill to keep this buried. Across town, Detective J.D. Dupree had spent days reviewing security footage from businesses near the diner where Eli was arrested. Finally, at Thompson's Hardware, he found what he needed: a clear external camera angle showing the entire confrontation. The footage contradicted Banks's report entirely. It showed Eli calmly de-escalating, protecting the homeless, veteran, and complying with all commands until the inexplicable order to lie on the ground. Gotcha, J.D. muttered, copying the file. Within hours, the clip appeared online, further inflaming public opinion. Meanwhile, Maya had enlisted her ex-boyfriend, a skilled hacker named Luke Thompson, to help access sealed records about Operation Black Echo. This is serious federal crime territory, Luke warned as his fingers flew across the keyboard. We're talking Espionage Act violations. I know the risks, Maya replied. But my father's life is at stake. If these firewalls are any indication, so are a lot of powerful careers. Luke whistled softly as encrypted files began filling his screen. Holy shit, Maya. This goes deep. The documents revealed a covert operation to eliminate a warlord named Ibrahim Sanji, who had allegedly acquired biological weapons. But buried in the operation logs were references to field testing and subject response monitoring, clinical language masking atrocities. Most damning was a memo from Colonel Klein to his private contractors. The Sierra Leone demonstration provides compelling efficacy data. Targeted deployment shows minimal environmental persistence but optimal lethality in the specified genetic demographic. They weren't stopping bioweapons, Maya whispered in horror. They were testing them on African villagers. The morning of the emergency hearing arrived with the courthouse surrounded by protesters, media, and heavily armed security. Inside, the small courtroom was tense as Eli was led in, still handcuffed despite his attorney's objections. Assistant District Attorney Wilson made the state's opening argument. Your Honor, while the state acknowledges inconsistencies in the arrest record, we have serious concerns about the defendant's mental stability. Reports indicate— Objection, Eli's court-appointed attorney shouted. These supposed reports have mysteriously appeared overnight with no verifiable sources. They're clearly fabricated. From the gallery, Maya stood up. Your Honor, I have evidence that directly contradicts the prosecution's claims. The judge banged his gavel. Ms. Rowe, you are not recognized by this court. These are DOD records. Maya held up a folder. They prove my father was following orders in a classified operation when— Bailiff, remove her if she speaks again, the judge ordered. The courtroom doors swung open. A tall figure in full military dress uniform walked down the center aisle. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulders. The room fell silent. Your Honor, General Whitmore said, his voice carrying effortlessly, I request permission to address this court regarding matters of national security. The judge stared, momentarily speechless. Cameras flashed despite the court's ban on photography. And you are? General Douglas Whitmore, United States Army. I have direct knowledge of Staff Sergeant Elijah Rowe's service and the classified operations relevant to this case. The judge glanced nervously at the packed gallery, then at the prosecutors huddled in urgent whispers. This is highly irregular, General. So is holding a decorated Marine on trumped-up charges to silence him, Whitmore replied evenly. After a tense conference at the bench, the judge reluctantly allowed Whitmore to testify. The general stood before the court, his bearing commanding. Even before he spoke. Staff Sergeant Elijah Rowe served under my command for 7 years, he began. During that time, he completed 14 deep cover operations, all highly classified. His actions directly prevented multiple terrorist plots from reaching American soil. The courtroom was utterly silent. In 2009, Sergeant Rowe was deployed. to Sierra Leone on Operation Black Echo. His mission parameters were exceeded when he discovered civilians being used as test subjects for experimental weapons. Rather than follow orders to eliminate witnesses, he chose to save innocent lives at great personal risk. Whitmore turned to face Eli directly. His actions represented the highest ideals of our military, even when those above him failed to uphold those same ideals. In his office overlooking the Potomac, Colonel Klein watched the live stream with growing rage. His carefully constructed narrative was unraveling on national television. He punched a button on his desk intercom. "Get me a press conference. Now. And contact our media assets. I want General Whitmore's mental competence questioned on every network." Within the hour, Klein stood before a hastily assembled press corps. It pains me to say this about a decorated officer, but General Whitmore's cognitive decline has been a concern for some time. His statements today represent a troubling fabrication, possibly the result of memory issues, possibly something more deliberate. As reporters shouted questions, Klein continued smoothly. "I worked with Sergeant Rowe. While his service was commendable, his post-deployment psychological evaluations showed concerning patterns of paranoia and confabulation. These are common but tragic consequences of combat stress." Back in the courtroom, Whitmore's testimony had concluded. The judge, visibly conflicted, called a brief recess to consider the extraordinary circumstances. When court resumed, his decision was terse. Given the new evidence and testimony, this court has no choice but to dismiss all local charges against Mr. Rowe. He is to be released immediately. A cheer erupted from the gallery. Maya rushed forward as deputies removed Eli's handcuffs. For the first time in years, father and daughter embraced. The celebration was short-lived. Just as they turned to leave, two men in dark suits entered. Through a side door. "Elijah Rowe?" one called out. "Federal agents, we have a warrant for your arrest for unauthorized disclosure of classified information in violation of the Espionage Act." Maya screamed as the agents moved forward with new handcuffs. Whitmore slammed his fist on the defense table, face contorted with fury. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "I'm calling the Secretary of Defense." But the federal agents were already reading Eli his rights. His face revealed nothing, no surprise, no fear, as if he had expected this all along. "Dad," Maya called out as they led him away. "This isn't over. I promise." Eli looked back once, his eyes meeting hers. For the first time, Maya saw something. There beyond his usual stoicism, a flicker of pride, and something that might have been hope. As the courtroom erupted in chaos, JD grabbed Maya's arm. "They're taking him to a federal holding facility, but this is just the beginning." "Of what?" she asked, watching her father disappear through the door. "Of the real fight," JD replied grimly. "They just made their biggest mistake yet. Now everyone's watching." Outside, news helicopters circled above the courthouse, broadcasting the scene to a nation suddenly captivated by the story of a silent hero and the growing evidence of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power. The storm had broken, and it was only gathering strength. The federal detention center known as Station Gray existed on no official maps. Located in a desert region classified as a restricted military testing range, the facility specialized in housing individuals deemed threats to national security. Its slate-colored walls rose from the barren landscape like a fortress, devoid of markings or identification. This was where they brought Elijah Rowe. The transport vehicle rolled through 3 checkpoints before reaching the main entrance. Eli sat silently, shackles on his wrists and ankles, as armed guards transferred him from the vehicle into a sterile processing area. "Prisoner 0547, announced a stern-faced woman in an unmarked uniform. "High security protocol." They stripped him, decontaminated him, gave him a gray jumpsuit with no insignia, and marched him through a labyrinth of identical corridors. His new cell was 8 by 10 feet, with a single bed bolted to the floor, a stainless steel toilet, and a camera watching from each corner. No windows. No clock. No way to mark the passage of time. In Washington, General Whitmore stormed through the Pentagon corridors, his aides struggling to keep pace. "Get me Secretary Walsh," he demanded, entering his office, "and find out who authorized that. Federal warrant." "Sir," His aide replied hesitantly. The secretary's office says he's unavailable for the foreseeable future. Unavailable? Whitmore's voice was dangerously quiet. A decorated Marine has been blackbagged to a site that officially doesn't exist, and the Secretary of Defense is unavailable? There's more, sir. This just came from the Joint Chiefs. The aide handed over a secure tablet. Whitmore's face darkened as he read. They're suggesting I take immediate retirement for health and personal reasons. They've scheduled a press conference for tomorrow. Whitmore slammed the tablet down. Like hell they have. Just as he reached for the phone, his private line rang. The caller ID showed a Department of Homeland Security prefix. Whitmore, he answered sharply. General, came a smooth voice. This is Director Phillips from the Intelligence Oversight Committee. I'm calling to strongly advise you to discontinue your personal crusade regarding Sergeant Rowe. Is that a threat, Director? It's a reminder that you've dedicated your life to serving this country. Don't sacrifice that legacy for one man, especially one with Rowe's complicated history. Take the retirement package. Enjoy your grandchildren. The line went dead before Whitmore could respond. In Atlanta, Maya sat in her empty apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered notes. 3 days since her father's second arrest, and she'd hit nothing but walls. Her editor had pulled her from the story due to personal involvement. Her calls to federal agencies went unreturned. Even her most reliable sources had gone silent. Her phone rang, displaying JD's number. Anything? She asked immediately. Nothing good, JD replied. Your dad's not in any federal facility I can access. It's like he vanished. That's impossible. They can't just disappear a U.S. citizen. Tell that to the people who took him. A pause. Maya, I got a visit today. 2 men in suits, no identification. They knew everything about me. My mortgage, my ex-wife's address, my son's school. They didn't make direct threats, but the message was clear. Maya closed her eyes. I'm sorry, JD. Don't be. This just tells me we're onto something big. His voice dropped. I found something else. A letter your father left with his personal effects at the county jail. Addressed to you. What does it say? I don't know. I'm looking at it right now. Sealed envelope. Want me to open it? No, Maya said quickly. I'll drive down tonight. 3 hours later, Maya sat in JD's car outside a 24-hour diner, the envelope trembling in her hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one line of text. When the system is broken, don't beg. Break the silence. Below the words were a series of numbers that made no immediate sense. Coordinates? JD suggested. Maybe. Maya stared at them. Or a code. Or account numbers. We need help deciphering this. What's your next move? I need someone who can navigate systems most people can't access. JD hesitated. I might know someone, but she doesn't come cheap, and she doesn't exactly work within legal boundaries. At this point, I'll take whatever help I can get. The next day, they met Zuri Washington in a coffee shop several towns away. With close-cropped hair, multiple ear piercings, and intelligence that radiated from her sharp eyes, the young woman assessed Maya with open skepticism. So you want me to hack federal systems to find your missing daddy? Zuri's fingers never stopped moving on her laptop. That's about 12 federal offenses before breakfast. I can pay, Maya began. It's not about money, Zuri cut her off. It's about risk. Last time I helped the government, they tried to throw me in prison. Only reason I'm free is I had insurance policies, files that would auto-release if I disappeared. This isn't for the government, Maya insisted. It's against them, or at least against the people abusing their power within it. Zuri's fingers paused. What's the operation name again? Black Echo. A flicker of recognition crossed Zuri's face. Army intelligence contracted me years ago to secure communications for something with Echo in the code name. Paid triple my normal rate for triple the encryption. Will you help us? Zuri studied Maya, then JD. On one condition, full immunity documentation for any past indiscretions, signed by someone with actual authority. JD nodded slowly. I think I know who might be willing. At Station Gray, Eli sat motionless on his bed as the cell door opened. A woman entered, slim, elegant, with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes were the color of winter ice. Sergeant Rowe, she said, pulling up the room's single chair. I'm Agent Ruth Mercer. I'll be conducting your evaluation. Eli said nothing. You've been through this before, Mercer continued, opening a file. Standard procedure for compromised assets. Still silence. You're actually something of a legend. In intelligence circles, she said, her tone conversational. The ghost sniper. 14 confirmed deep cover operations. Over 60 confirmed eliminations. Perfect record. Until Sierra Leone. Eli's eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly. Did you know that my brother was there? Mercer leaned forward. Jason. Mercer, field operative. He died when the extraction team you abandoned got ambushed. There was no extraction team, Eli said, his voice rough from disuse. So he speaks. Mercer smiled without warmth. Of course there was an extraction team. You were too busy playing hero to wait for them. Your brother wasn't in Sierra Leone. Mercer's smile vanished. You don't know anything about my brother. There were 6 operatives assigned to Black Echo. None named Mercer. A flash of something, uncertainty, crossed her face before she regained composure. From her briefcase, she removed a small digital recorder. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. She pressed play. Screams filled the cell. Women, children, the sound of gunfire. Remember them? Mercer asked coldly. The people you couldn't save? Eli's face remained impassive, but a muscle in his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Or how about this? She played another recording, a woman's voice, distressed, calling for help. Maya? Eli jerked forward, eyes suddenly wild. Mercer clicked off the recording. Don't worry, your daughter is fine. For now. That was just a simulation. But it's interesting how quickly you respond to certain stimuli, isn't it? Eli settled back, his momentary lapse of control gone, but something had changed. Behind his eyes, a storm was brewing. Meanwhile, Zuri had set up operations in a rented cabin outside cell service range. Surrounded by computer equipment, she worked, with focused intensity, while Maya and JD provided whatever support they could. Federal systems are a nightmare, Zuri muttered, fingers flying across multiple keyboards. But everybody leaves footprints, even Black Ops. After 36 hours of work, she let out a victorious whoop. Got something. Requisition orders for a transport to a facility called Station Gray. Coordinates match an environmental testing. Range in Nevada. That's it, Maya said. That's where they're holding him. Zuri pulled up satellite imagery. Bad news is, this place is Fort Knox on steroids. Triple perimeter security, signal jammers, and if I'm reading this right, a full tactical response team on site 24/7, so we can't get him out, JD said grimly. Not without an army, Zuri confirmed. Maya stared at the images. Then we need to make it so toxic they have to let him out. Back at Station Gray, Eli lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Days of isolation, sleep deprivation, and psychological pressure had taken their toll. In the darkness of his cell, shadows shifted and coalesced into figures from his past. He saw the faces of men he'd killed, women he'd failed to save, children caught in crossfire. And one face in particular, a young girl in Sierra Leone, no more than 14, clutching a rifle nearly as tall as herself. In his hallucination, she approached his bed, her dark eyes questioning. Why did you let me go? She asked. Why did you disobey? Eli closed his eyes, but the visions continued. You were a child, he whispered to the empty room. Just a child. In his mind, he was back in the compound in Sierra Leone. The mission: eliminate the warlord Kosa and all his lieutenants, including his teenage soldiers. But when Eli had his rifle trained on the young girl, the last surviving fighter after his assault, he couldn't pull the trigger. Instead, he'd lowered his weapon, given her water, and told her to run. That choice had changed everything. It had led him to discover the testing facility, the 6 civilians, the American scientists taking notes as people died from experimental bioweapons. In his delirium, Eli began scratching at the wall with his fingernails, leaving traces of blood. As he etched a series of coordinates, the location of a mass grave that contained evidence the cleanup teams had missed. Evidence that could still bring down the people behind Black Echo, if anyone knew where to look. In Washington, Maya had arranged to meet Colonel Klein under the pretense of an exclusive interview. With a hidden recorder running, she sat across from him in an upscale restaurant. "It's a shame about General Whitmore's declining health," Klein said smoothly. "Early-onset dementia is a terrible thing." "Is that the official story now?" Maya asked, keeping her tone professional despite her disgust. "It's the truth, Ms. Rowe. Just as it's true that your father, while heroic in many ways, suffered severe psychological trauma during his service." "Interesting. Because I've interviewed 7 members of his unit, and they all describe him as the most stable, disciplined soldier they'd ever served with." Klein's smile remained fixed. "Combat affects different people in different ways, often years later. Like the combat in Sierra Leone, during Operation Black Echo?" A flicker of tension crossed Klein's face before he composed himself. "I'm not familiar with that operation name." "Really? Because I have documents with your signature, authorizing the deployment of experimental bioweapons against civilian populations." "That's preposterous," Klein scoffed, but his knuckles whitened around his water glass. "Is it? What about Amari Nguvu? Does that name mean anything to you?" Klein's face drained of color. He stood abruptly. "This interview is over. My office will be in touch about these slanderous accusations." As he walked away, Maya knew she'd struck gold. The name had been a shot in the dark, the young girl mentioned in Foster's video, but Klein's reaction confirmed everything. Using her journalistic connections, Maya began searching for anyone named Amari Nguvu who might have survived the Sierra Leone operation. It seemed impossible after 15 years, but 3 days later, she found a match. A human rights attorney working at the International Criminal Court, originally from Sierra Leone. Zuri, meanwhile, had performed what she called the most beautiful hack of my career, a brief surgical intrusion into the Pentagon's live communication system that captured 45 seconds of an encrypted video conference. It took her days to decrypt the footage, but what it revealed changed everything. "They weren't just testing bioweapons," she explained, showing Maya and JD the decrypted video. "They were developing ethnically targeted pathogens designed to affect specific genetic markers found predominantly in certain populations. War crimes," JD said flatly. "Worse. Preparation for genocide." Zuri pointed to a familiar face in the footage. "And look who's giving the presentation on field test efficacy." Klein. At Station Gray, Eli's condition deteriorated. During a particularly intense interrogation session, he collapsed, his body finally giving out after days of resistance. The facility medic, conducting a routine scan, frowned at his findings. "This man has multiple healed injuries consistent with battlefield trauma," he reported to Mercer. "Ribs broken and rebroken at least 3 times, evidence of shrapnel wounds across his back, stress fractures in both legs consistent with forced marches under heavy load." "Your point?" Mercer asked coldly. "My point is that this is consistent with his service record, not with someone manufacturing a story. These injuries tell a history of extraordinary service and suffering." Mercer dismissed the medic, but his words had planted a seed of doubt. That night, she reviewed Foster's video testimony, comparing it with the official reports. The discrepancies were too significant to ignore. When she allowed Eli to watch a news report showing Maya and a woman identified as Amari Nguvu announcing a press conference, she saw something she hadn't expected. A single tear tracking down his stoic face. "Your wife died while you were deployed, didn't she?" Mercer asked, her voice softer than before. Eli nodded once. "And you never forgave yourself for not being there?" "I was following orders," he whispered, "serving my country." "While they used you for their own agenda," Mercer stood abruptly. "Get some rest, Sergeant. Tomorrow will be difficult." In his secure compound outside Washington, Klein watched the announcement of the upcoming press conference with mounting panic. Maya Rowe standing beside Amari Nguvu, the living embodiment of his greatest mistake, threatened everything he'd built. Neutralize the problem, he ordered his head of security. Make it look like an accident during transport. Sir, the media spotlight is intense right now, the man cautioned. I don't care. This ends now. Klein turned to his computer, drafting orders for Eli's immediate transfer from Station Gray, a transfer that would end with a tragic escape attempt. What Klein didn't know was that Zuri had placed a monitoring algorithm on his network. The moment the transfer orders were drafted, she received an alert. They're moving him, she told Maya urgently. Tomorrow morning, and based on the encrypted language, they don't plan for him to arrive. We need to stop that transport, JD said. We can't, Zuri replied. Not physically, but we can make it politically impossible. Her fingers flew across her keyboard. I'm releasing everything, right now. Every document, every video, every name. Maya nodded grimly. Do it. By dawn, the story had exploded. Every major news outlet ran breaking coverage of the Black Echo files. Thousands of classified documents detailing biological weapons testing, cover-ups, and the heroic actions of a Marine who had sacrificed his career to save innocent lives. Hashtags like Sound Free Eli Rowe and Black Eco Truth trended worldwide. Veterans groups organized protests outside federal buildings. Congressional representatives from both parties demanded answers. General Whitmore, who had refused the retirement package, leveraged his considerable influence to secure an emergency federal injunction against Eli's transfer. On the grounds of imminent danger to the prisoner, his attorney argued before a hastily convened federal judge, and substantial evidence of a conspiracy to silence a material witness to war crimes. The judge, reviewing the flood of documents now in the public domain, granted the injunction. At Station Gray, Mercer received the order to halt the transfer with visible relief. Something had shifted in her, a recognition that she'd been on the wrong side of history. When armed federal marshals arrived with transfer papers signed by the Attorney General himself, she personally escorted Eli to the exit, whispering, "I'm sorry about your wife," as they parted. Outside the facility, a crowd had gathered. Press, protesters, and in the front, Maya, standing beside General Whitmore and a dignified African woman, Amari Nguvu. Eli emerged from the building, squinting in the sunlight, thinner, stubbled, but unbowed. The crowd erupted in cheers as he descended the steps. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Eli remained silent until he reached Maya. Father and daughter embraced tightly, years of distance dissolving in that moment. When he finally spoke, looking up at the sky, his voice carried clearly through the sudden hush. Now you see. Across town, JD was missing the reunion. Hours earlier, he'd been grabbed outside his apartment, beaten, and taken to an abandoned warehouse. Klein's men wanted to know what evidence remained unreleased, what insurance policies Zuri had established. Despite the pain, JD revealed nothing. You're too late, he told them through bloodied lips. It's all out there now. Everyone knows. The ETIAB lead interrogator, a former special ops soldier named Brock Taylor, grew increasingly frustrated. Klein says you're holding back, something about coordinates. Where are they? JD managed a pained smile. Who says there are coordinates? Taylor nodded to his associate, who delivered another blow to JD's already bruised ribs. We know Rowe passed something to his daughter. Numbers, locations. We need them. I don't know what you're talking about, JD gasped. Then maybe we need to ask the daughter directly, Taylor suggested. She's at Station Gray now, completely exposed. Fear flashed across JD's face before he could control it. She doesn't know anything. We'll see. Taylor checked his watch. You've got 1 hour to remember those coordinates, or we move on to Maya Rowe. Meanwhile, Zuri had been monitoring JD's phone GPS. When it remained stationary for over 3 hours in an industrial area, she knew something was wrong. His signal's coming from this warehouse district, she told Maya over a secure line after the Station Gray reunion. He's missed 3 check-ins. Klein's people, Maya said immediately. Dad, They've got JD. Eli's expression hardened. How many men does Whitmore have with him? 4. Private security, former special forces. Not enough. Eli turned to Whitmore. I need your team, and I need weapons. You just got released from federal custody, Whitmore cautioned. Another incident could... They have JD, Eli interrupted, and they'll come for Maya next. Whitmore hesitated only a moment before nodding. Andrews, get the gear from the trunk, full tactical kit. Within 30 minutes, Eli had transformed from recently released prisoner to combat operator. Dressed in black tactical gear, weapons checked with mechanical precision, he briefed the small rescue team with cold efficiency. 5 heat signatures, inside the building. Zuri reported from her laptop, having hacked into the city's thermal imaging system. 4 moving, 1 stationary. That's probably JD. They'll expect a frontal assault, Eli told the team. We'll use their expectations against them. Andrews and Wilson create a diversion at the main entrance. Whitmore and I will enter through the roof access. Just like Kandahar, Whitmore said with a grim smile. Eli nodded once. Just like Kandahar. As the team prepared to move out, Maya grabbed her father's arm. I'm coming too. Absolutely not, Eli and Whitmore said simultaneously. He's in there. Because of me, Maya insisted. I won't sit here while you risk your lives. Eli looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the determination that mirrored his own. You stay with Zuri in the vehicle, monitor communications. If anything goes wrong, you drive away immediately. Understood? Maya nodded reluctantly. Inside the warehouse, JD drifted in and out of consciousness. His face was swollen, ribs screaming with each breath. Taylor paced impatiently, checking his phone for updates. Klein says we're out of time, he announced. To his team. Finish him and let's move on the girl. One of the men raised a pistol to JD's head, just as the front door exploded inward. Andrews and Wilson stormed through the smoke, weapons firing. Non-lethal rounds that created maximum chaos with minimal casualties. In the confusion, no one noticed 2 figures descending silently from the rafters. Eli moved like a shadow, neutralizing the rear guard with a precise strike that rendered the man unconscious. Whitmore took down another with similar efficiency. Taylor realized the attack too late. He turned to find Eli standing behind him, cold fury in his eyes. You, Taylor gasped. Recognition dawning. The ghost. You threatened my daughter, Eli said softly, the quietness of his voice more terrifying than any shout. Taylor reached for his weapon, but Eli was faster, much faster. The former Marine needed only 3 moves to disarm Taylor and leave him unconscious on the concrete floor. Clear, Andrews called from the front of the warehouse. Clear, Whitmore confirmed from the rear. Eli knelt beside JD, checking his pulse. He needs a hospital. Not a public one, Whitmore said. I know a private clinic. No questions asked. As they carefully moved JD to the waiting vehicle, Maya rushed forward. He'll live, Eli assured her. But he's hurt bad. JD's eyes fluttered open. Did I miss the party? He mumbled through swollen lips. Save your strength, Maya told him, squeezing his hand. The coordinates, JD whispered urgently. Taylor kept asking about coordinates. They're important. Whatever your father scratched into that wall. Eli's expression changed. They found them. Found what? Maya asked. Evidence. I buried it before extraction. Bodies with tissue samples proving the weapons testing. Serial numbers that can be traced back to American labs. GPS logs that place Klein at the test sites. Eli looked grim. If they're still looking for it, it means they never found it. And it's still there? Whitmore asked incredulously. After 15 years? In a sealed case, 20 feet underground, Eli confirmed. The cleanup team searched for days, but the jungle reclaimed the area quickly. Only I know the exact location. This changes everything, Maya said. With physical evidence, we could... An explosion rocked the street outside. 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the warehouse, disgorging armed men in tactical gear. Klein's private army, Whitmore said grimly. Andrews, get the package out through the back. Everyone else, defensive positions. No, Eli countermanded. Everyone leaves now, I'll delay them. Dad, no, Maya protested. You have what you need, Eli told her calmly. The coordinates. The story. Get JD to safety and finish this. Before she could argue further, Whitmore pulled her toward the rear exit. He's right. This is what he does best. The last thing Maya saw as they escaped was her father melting into the shadows of the warehouse, a ghost once more, preparing to face impossible odds. 3 days later, the congressional hearing convened in an atmosphere of unprecedented tension. Security was tripled after the warehouse incident, which had made national news when Klein's private military contractors engaged in a firefight with an unknown assailant who had somehow managed to incapacitate 6 trained operatives before disappearing. Maya sat in the front row of the gallery, her heart in her throat. Beside her, Amari Nguvu reviewed her prepared testimony one last time. JD, still recovering, watched the proceedings via secure video link from Whitmore's private clinic. There had been no word from Eli since the warehouse. Maya alternated between hope and despair hourly. Colonel Klein entered flanked by attorneys and security. He looked confident, unaffected by the storm swirling around him. His media campaign had been relentless, portraying Eli as mentally unstable, Whitmore as suffering cognitive decline, and the entire Black Echo narrative as a conspiracy theory. The committee chair called the hearing to order. Today we continue our investigation into allegations regarding Operation Black Echo and related classified activities. Our first witness was scheduled to be Sergeant Elijah Rowe, but we've been informed he is unable to attend due to security concerns. A murmur ran through the gallery. Klein allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. However, the chair continued, we have received sworn testimony from Sergeant Rowe by secure deposition, which will be entered into the record. Klein's smile faltered. Additionally, our first in-person witness today is Ms. Amari Nguvu, human rights attorney with the International Criminal Court. Amari approached the witness table with dignified composure. After being sworn in, she faced the committee with unwavering gaze. Ms. Nguvu, began the chair, could you please tell the committee how you came to be involved in this matter? 15 years ago I was a child soldier in Sierra Leone, Amari said, her voice clear and steady. I was 14 years old, forcibly conscripted by the warlord Kosa after my family was killed. On April 17, 2009, an American soldier infiltrated our compound. He eliminated the adult fighters but spared the children. She paused, composing herself. That man was Sergeant Elijah Rowe. When he found me, I was the last one standing. I had a rifle pointed at him. He could have killed me, should have killed me according to his orders. Instead, he lowered his weapon, gave me his water, and told me to run. And what happened next? Prompted a committee member. I ran, but not far. I hid and watched. I saw Sergeant Rowe discover the testing facility in the valley beyond our compound. I saw him evacuate the villagers who were still alive. I saw him document everything before the helicopters came. Ms. Nguvu, you're now a human rights attorney. In your professional opinion, what was happening at that facility? War crimes, she said simply. Biological weapons tested on civilian populations. I've reviewed the evidence and compared it to similar cases I've prosecuted. The pattern is unmistakable. Klein leaned forward, whispering urgently to his attorney. The committee pressed on, asking Amari about specific details, corroborating them against Eli's deposition and the mountain of documents now in the public domain. Halfway through Amari's testimony, a commotion at the rear of the chamber drew all eyes. The doors opened to admit General Whitmore, and beside him, thin, bruised, but very much alive, Elijah Rowe. A collective gasp went up from the gallery. Maya's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Chairman, Whitmore announced, Sergeant Rowe has arrived to testify in person. Klein rose to his feet, face contorted in disbelief and rage. This is irregular. We had no notice. Sit down, Colonel, the chair ordered. The committee will hear Sergeant Rowe. As Abimwan, Eli moved toward the witness table. His eyes met Maya's. The ghost of a smile crossed his face before he turned to face the committee, ready at last to break 15 years of silence with the full, unvarnished truth. Behind him, on screens visible to the entire chamber, images appeared, freshly excavated, evidence from the coordinates Eli had remembered, retrieved by an international team of war crimes investigators. Physical proof that could not be denied, spun or buried again. The truth, at last, in the light of day. Across the chamber, Colonel Klein watched his carefully constructed world begin to crumble, the weight of exposed secrets finally too heavy to bear. The morning dawned crisp and clear as the gates of Station Gray opened for the last time. A convoy of vehicles rolled out, black SUVs flanking an unmarked sedan. Inside sat Elijah Rowe, finally free after weeks of detention and interrogation. The road leading from the facility had transformed overnight. What had been empty desert was now lined with people. Veterans in uniform standing at attention, protesters, with signs, media vans with satellite dishes reaching skyward. Word had spread, and America had come to witness the Ghost Walk free. The convoy slowed as it approached the improvised checkpoint where Maya stood with Amari Nguvu and General Whitmore. Secret Service agents had established a perimeter keeping the crowds back, but allowing this small welcoming committee to approach. When the sedan door opened, Eli emerged, squinting into the sunlight. He wore simple civilian clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt that hung loose on his frame. Weeks of detention had left him thinner, his cheekbones more pronounced, but his posture remained military straight. Maya moved first, crossing the invisible boundary between them. For a moment they simply looked at each other, as if relearning familiar features. Then they embraced, his arms wrapping around her with careful gentleness, as though she might dissolve if he held too tight. "You're really free?" she whispered into his shoulder. "For now," he replied, his deep voice rough with emotion. Whitmore approached next, executing a formal salute that Eli returned with precision despite his civilian status. No words were needed between the men who had sacrificed so much. Lastly, Amari Nguvu stepped forward. The striking lawyer extended her hand, which Eli took in both of his. "The girl with the rifle," he said softly, recognition in his eyes. She nodded. "The man who showed mercy when he had every reason not to." Cameras clicked frantically, capturing the moment when the ghost finally stepped fully into the light. Someone shouted a question. "Sergeant Rowe, how does it feel to be free?" Eli gazed out at the gathered crowd, at the faces hungry for words, for explanation, for meaning. He had spent decades in silence, carrying burdens few could comprehend. Now the world waited for his voice. He looked up, eyes clear, and said simply, "Now you see." Those 3 words, broadcast across every network, became the rallying cry for what followed. Meanwhile, across state lines, Detective J.D. Dupree was fighting his own battle. After his rescue from Klein's men, he'd spent days in hospital recovering from broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and various contusions. The physical wounds were healing faster than the psychological ones. The warehouse where he'd been held contained evidence of other interrogations. People who hadn't been lucky enough to have friends looking for them. J.D. had insisted on being involved in the investigation despite his condition. "You need to rest," the doctor had told him. "I'll rest when Klein's entire network is dismantled," J.D. had replied. Now he sat in a safe house, surrounded by files and digital records, working with the FBI task force assigned to unraveling Klein's extensive operation. The work was difficult, the hours long, but every document connected another dot, revealed another accomplice. When the door opened unexpectedly, J.D. reached instinctively for his weapon before recognizing Maya and Zuri. "You're supposed to be at the press conference," he said, lowering his gun. "We wanted to see you first," Maya replied, embracing him carefully to avoid his injuries. "Dad's being debriefed by the DOJ. I have about 2 hours." Zuri hung back, eyeing the stacks of documents. "Amateur hour," she muttered, gesturing to the FBI's organized chaos. "I could have this digitized and cross-referenced in a day." "That's exactly why we're here," Maya said. "JD, we need your help. Dad's testimony is crucial, But Klein had too many friends in too many places. We need insurance. What kind of insurance? The kind that ensures nobody else disappears. Maya's eyes were hard, determined. We're starting a foundation for wrongfully detained veterans, for exposing black ops abuse. I want you to run security. JD considered this. I've got a badge, which limits what you can do officially, Maya countered. And after what happened, do you really trust the system to protect the people who need it most? He didn't need to answer. The bruises still healing on his face spoke volumes. What about you? He asked Zuri. The hacker shrugged. I handle the digital side. Information is the real battlefield now. JD looked between them, the journalist and the hacker, both unflinching in their determination. He thought of Eli, of the system that had tried to bury him, of how close they'd all come to failing. When do we start? In Washington, the congressional hearing had reconvened. The chamber was packed beyond capacity as Eli took the stand again, this time not as a detainee but as the government's star witness against Colonel Aaron Klein. Klein sat at the defense table, designer suit replaced by prison orange, his typical smooth confidence curdled into barely contained rage. His legal team had been reduced by half. Several attorneys had withdrawn representation overnight as evidence continued to mount. Sergeant Rowe, began the committee chair, could you identify the individuals present at the Sierra Leone testing facility? Eli's testimony was methodical, precise. Each name, each date, each detail delivered with the same calm certainty with which he had once lined up shots from impossible distances. The gallery listened in horrified silence as he detailed atrocities committed in America's name, biological agents tested on unwitting villagers, data collected on suffering, death recorded and analyzed for efficacy. And Colonel Klein's role in this operation? The chair asked. He designed the protocol, selected the test sites, analyzed the results. Eli's voice remained steady. When I reported civilian casualties, he ordered them categorized as collateral. Validation metrics. Klein slammed his hand on the table. That's a lie, he shouted, rising halfway before his attorney pulled him back down. The chair called for order. Colonel Klein will have his opportunity to respond. When Klein's turn came, his defense strategy quickly unraveled. Confronted with document after document bearing his signature, with testimony from multiple witnesses, including former private contractors who'd turned state's evidence, his denials rang increasingly hollow. These operations were authorized at the highest levels, Klein insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. I was following orders to protect American interests against emerging biological threats. By developing those same threats, countered a committee member, by understanding them, by ensuring American defensive preparedness, by testing them on African civilians? Klein's face contorted. They were combatants in a war zone. The youngest victim was 4 years old, the chair said quietly, sliding a photograph across the table. Was she a combatant, Colonel? The gallery gasped as Klein's mask finally slipped completely. You naive fools, he snarled. You think the world rewards mercy? Ask Rowe what mercy got him. Decades of silence, a life destroyed. The enemies we face don't play by Geneva rules, but you'd handicap America's defense with your moral squeamishness. As security officers moved to restrain the now shouting Klein, Eli remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. He had spent years bearing the weight of terrible knowledge in silence. Now, finally, the truth was speaking for itself. Days later, Maya visited JD in the hospital again. His condition had improved, but the doctors insisted on keeping him for observation. How's your dad? JD asked as she settled into the chair beside his bed. Quiet, working through things. Maya smiled, faintly. Some habits don't change overnight. And the foundation? Taking shape. We've already had calls from 3 veterans with similar stories, different operations, same pattern of silencing. JD nodded thoughtfully. Klein's preliminary hearing is tomorrow. They're adding new charges as more evidence comes in. His whole network is unraveling. Good, Maya said firmly. Have you seen this? She handed him a printout. Military tribunal proceedings against Klein had been authorized for crimes committed under military authority, bypassing potential civilian court delays. He'll never see daylight again, JD observed. If he lives that long. Apparently he's been transferred to solitary for his own protection. Too many people inside with connections to his victims. As Maya left the hospital, her phone rang. General Whitmore calling with news. Klein's trial had revealed connections to multiple privatized military operations involving illegal weapons testing, corporate connections, political protection, money trails leading to offshore accounts. It's bigger than we thought, Whitmore told her. Much bigger. Can we prove it? With your father's testimony, yes, but it's dangerous, Maya. These people have resources, influence. We have the truth, she replied. And now, people are finally listening. In a quiet moment between testimonies and interviews, Eli and Maya sat in her apartment, sharing takeout Chinese food. The silence between them had transformed from a wall into a comfortable space where words weren't always necessary. What happens next? Maya finally asked, setting down her chopsticks. Eli considered the question. Justice, hopefully, for the people who didn't survive to see it. And for you? After all this is over? He looked out the window, to the city lights below. I don't know how to live without secrets anymore. You could try, Maya suggested gently. One day at a time, like the rest of us. Eli's lips curved in the barest suggestion of a smile. Maybe I could fix more trucks. Maya laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. Dad made a joke. Alert the media. Oh wait, I am the media. For the first time in years, Eli laughed too. A rusty sound, unpracticed but real. In that moment, father and daughter glimpsed a possible future where the past didn't define everything. Later that week, Agent Ruth Mercer approached a podium at the Department of Justice. Camera flashes illuminated her severe features as she formally announced her resignation. I have served this country for 22 years, she began, voice steady. I believed that service sometimes required moral compromise in pursuit of security. I was wrong. She detailed systemic failures that had enabled operations like Black Echo, the compartmentalization of information, the lack of oversight, the culture of unquestioning obedience. The institutions I served failed not only the victims of these operations but the American people whose values we claim to protect, she concluded. I cannot undo the harm my complicity caused, but I can ensure it never happens again. Within months, Mercer had joined a veterans advocacy group focused on PTSD and moral injury. Her insider knowledge of intelligence practices made her uniquely effective at navigating bureaucracy to secure health care and recognition for those the system had failed. As Klein's trial proceeded through the military justice system, a comprehensive documentary about Operation Black Echo was released. Produced by Maya's news organization, it featured testimony from survivors, witnesses, and government officials willing to speak on the record. Eli declined all interviews, but allowed his sworn testimony to be included. He directed his portion of the proceeds to a fund supporting Sierra Leone victims' families. The documentary's final sequence showed the site where Eli had rescued 47 civilians, now a memorial garden maintained by local residents. A simple stone bore an inscription in both English and the local dialect. For those saved by the ghost who walked among us. The White House rose garden gleamed in the morning sun. Roses bloomed in carefully tended beds, their fragrance hanging in the humid air as officials and invited guests took their seats. Security was unusually tight. The ceremony closed to general press. Only a handful of selected journalists allowed, Elijah Rowe among them. President Wallace approached the podium, his expression solemn. Today, we acknowledge a debt that can never truly be repaid, a recognition long overdue. At his gesture, Eli rose from his seat in the front row. He wore a simple dark suit, his posture military straight. The president extended a blue velvet case. By the power vested in me as Commander-in-Chief, I hereby grant Elijah James Rowe a full presidential pardon for any actions taken in service to his country during Operation Black Echo and related classified missions." Eli accepted the case with a formal nod. When offered the microphone, he spoke briefly. "I don't need a medal, sir, but I would request a scholarship in Sarah Rowe's name for children of veterans." The president seemed momentarily taken back before recovering. "Consider it done, Sergeant." As the small crowd applauded, Maya captured the moment with her journalist's eye. Not just the ceremony, but her father's quiet dignity, his determination to redirect attention from himself to others who deserved recognition. 3 months later, the Maya Rowe Foundation opened its doors in a renovated brownstone in Washington. Its mission: to support wrongfully detained veterans and expose abuses of power in classified operations. Maya served as executive director, with JD heading security operations and Zuri managing their digital intelligence division. Their first case involved a Marine held incommunicado for 2 years after witnessing civilian casualties during a classified drone operation. Within 6 months, they had secured his release and exposed a pattern of silencing witnesses across multiple theaters of operation. The foundation quickly became known as a place where truth could safely emerge from shadows. On a cool autumn morning, Klein's final judgment was delivered in a military tribunal. Found guilty on multiple counts of war crimes, unauthorized weapons, development, and treason, he received life imprisonment without possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, Klein stared straight ahead, his face a mask of contempt. He never spoke publicly again, refusing all interview requests and declining to assist investigations into his collaborators. Weeks later, in Eli's hometown, General Whitmore and Ruth Mercer stood together at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The renovated community center had been transformed into a specialized clinic for veterans dealing with PTSD and moral injury. "We call it the Ghost's Haven," Whitmore announced to the gathered crowd, "a place where those carrying invisible wounds can find healing and hope." Though invited, Eli did not attend the opening ceremony, but occasionally, in the months that followed, he would visit quietly, sitting with veterans who couldn't sleep, who saw things others couldn't see, who carried burdens civilians couldn't understand. He rarely spoke during these visits. His presence was enough, living proof that even the deepest wounds could heal given time and truth. In New York, at the Pulitzer Prize ceremony, Maya stood at the podium in an elegant black dress, her father watching proudly from the audience. "This award belongs to every person who refused to accept silence as the final answer," she said, clutching the certificate. "Sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free, it helps you finally come home." Her investigation into Black Echo and similar operations had exposed systematic abuses spanning decades and administrations. The resulting reforms in military oversight had become known as the Rowe Protocols, ensuring greater transparency and accountability in classified operations. Later that evening, at a small family celebration, Maya found her father standing alone on the hotel balcony, looking out over the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, joining him. "Just remembering," he replied softly. "Sierra Leone, the moment everything changed." The memory played in his mind like footage he'd reviewed 1,000 times. Rain pouring through jungle canopy, mud sucking at his boots as he approached the compound. The teenage girl with the rifle, Amari, pointing it at him with trembling hands. He could have taken the shot. Should have, according to his orders. Instead, he'd lowered his weapon, reached slowly for his canteen and offered it to her. "Don't look back," he'd whispered as she took the water. "Just run." That choice, that moment of humanity in the midst of hell, had set everything in motion. The discovery of the testing facility, the decision to evacuate civilians, the evidence collected, the years of silence that followed, and finally, the reckoning. "Any regrets?" Maya asked, studying his profile in the city glow. Eli considered the question seriously, as he did all things. "Only that I didn't speak sooner. Maybe your mother would have understood why I had to stay silent." Maya touched his arm gently. "She knew you loved her, Dad." even when you couldn't explain why you were the way you were. In the office of the Foundation, Zuri monitored intelligence feeds with her typical intense focus. Something had triggered one of her algorithms, a pattern of encrypted communications using terminology similar to Black Echo protocols. The phrase Echo Reborn appeared in multiple intercepts from former associates of Klein, now operating in private military contracting. Whatever it was, it had begun accelerating after Klein's conviction, as if his imprisonment had been a signal rather than a deterrent. Zuri hesitated before alerting Maya. They had all earned some peace, but the truth didn't rest, and neither could those committed to protecting it. She saved the intercepts to a secure drive. Tomorrow would be soon enough to sound the alarm. Tonight was for celebration, for acknowledging how far they had come. At a military academy outside Washington, students gathered for General Whitmore's guest lecture on ethical leadership in combat situations. Now retired, Whitmore had found a new purpose in educating the next generation of officers. After his formal presentation, a cadet raised a hand. "Sir, given everything that happened with Operation Black Echo, do you regret your military service?" Whitmore considered the young man thoughtfully. "Not a day," he replied, "but I regret every silence we let last too long." His words were recorded by several cadets and quickly spread through military forums. In the following months, multiple service members came forward with their own stories of operations that had crossed ethical lines, creating a cultural shift toward accountability within the ranks. As spring arrived, Maya and Eli walked together, along a hillside path overlooking the town where it had all begun. Wildflowers dotted the grass, and birds called in the clear air. They moved in comfortable silence, their relationship rebuilt on new foundations of honesty and shared purpose. "They know who you are now," Maya said, pausing to look out over the vista. "The real you." Eli shook his head slightly. "No, now they know who you are." Maya looked at him questioningly. "My legacy isn't what I did in silence," he explained. "It's what you did by breaking it." The sentiment brought unexpected tears to Maya's eyes. All her life, she had sought her father's approval without realizing she already had it, had always had it, even during the years of distance and unspoken truths. The next morning, Eli received a package from the Department of Defense, the medal he had refused at the White House ceremony. A note attached read simply, "For the record, whether you want it or not, you earned it. Whitmore." Eli studied the medal briefly, feeling its weight in his palm. Then he placed it in his pocket and drove to the local park. There, he found a quiet bench overlooking a playground where children laughed and played, unburdened by the shadows that had defined his life for so long. He set the medal down and weighted it with a small stone. Beside it, he left a handwritten note. "To the next forgotten hero, speak up. You're not alone anymore." As he walked away, an elderly veteran approached the bench, noticed the medal, and read the note. The man looked up, scanning the park, but Eli was already gone, a ghost once more, but now by choice rather than necessity. Back at Martha Wilson's house, Eli resumed work on her perpetually troublesome truck. The routine task brought him a peace he'd rarely known, the simplicity of a problem with a clear solution, parts that fit together as they should, machinery that worked according to consistent principles. "You're always welcome to dinner, Mr. Rowe," Martha called from her porch. "No need to eat alone every night." Eli straightened from the engine, wiped his hands on a rag, and did something that once would have been unthinkable. He smiled and said, "Thank you, I'd like that." In Washington, the Elijah Rowe Foundation continued its work, case by case, truth by truth, building a legacy of accountability where silence had once reigned. On Maya's desk sat a framed photograph, Eli and Sarah on their wedding day, young and hopeful, before secrets had carved chasms between them. Beside it rested a more recent image, Maya, Eli, and Amari Nguvu, with her son, little Elijah, at the opening of a school in Sierra Leone built with foundation funds. In the photo, Eli knelt at the boy's level, showing him how to hold a camera rather than a weapon, teaching him to capture truth rather than end it. and on the walls of the Foundation's main conference room hung a simple plaque bearing the words that had launched their mission. The 3 words Eli had spoken when he finally emerged from the shadows into the light of truth. Now you see. What would you have done if the hero they arrested looked nothing like the one you imagined? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more powerful stories that reveal the truth behind the silence.